is preparing for an immediate departure at Gate 4. All guests must proceed to Gate 4 for boarding. This serves as the final boarding call. The boarding doors will close in a few minutes. Mahalo.
Not really, but it's to Puaiohi. They're native birds to Kauai, to this island. We have a breeding program back in the Big Island. We breed them and then we bring them back and release them. Yeah, these are the last two.
These birds were born in captivity at the breeding facilities on the Big Island at Puaiohi Bird Conservation Center. They have been in the captive flock for a number of years. For a variety of reasons, they weren't quite ready to be released last year when we released a number of the others in their cohort. I think that day of, they just were feeling a little off. Their weight was a little low. They just weren't quite themselves. And so they were kept back one additional year until they were ready to be released into the wild, where they could join their other captive counterparts and the rest of the Puaiohi we are studying in the wild. We have a field camp there from which we can monitor the progress of these birds once they've been released. They all have color bands on them that are individually different combinations, so we can tell which bird is which, and we can track them as they find their way in this new world. Initially, we had really good success with the captive breeding program and the releases, which is why it continued for so many years. The wild birds, the captive birds persisted in the wild for a number of months. We had evidence of them breeding and raising successful young. There was one bird who had a combination of bands that lended to her having the nickname Washington Peanut Butter, which I can tell you about some other time. She had several nests at the same field camp, Halapakai, and probably did contribute to the wild population. But over time, we noticed that the captive bred birds were not faring as well. Many of them died within the months following release, and over the next few months, we ceased to be able to track them. We would no longer find any signs of the captive birds, and it seemed like the releases as a whole were not having any traction in the wild. And so that's one of the many reasons why we have decided at this point to discontinue the captive breeding program, and why we are no longer maintaining birds in captivity, because they just don't seem to be doing that well as far as a tool of bolstering the wild population. We suspect that these individual birds themselves will do okay, but as a tool, and a fairly expensive tool at that, for changing the recovery trajectory of this program, we think, or of this species, we think our money is best spent in rodent control, for example, because we know that Puaiohi suffer a great deal of rat predation. So we're just kind of changing gears so that we're focusing more efforts on the wild birds at this point. The Puaiohi is a bird that lives up in the remote reaches of the Alakai that most people will never see, but it's part of our kuleana, it's part of our culture here living in Hawaii. And so these trips that these birds make from the captive breeding centers back out to the island are one of the few chances that people have to come in close contact with a species that is part of their heritage, but otherwise they may never see. Right, so you asked me about the reasons for this transition at this point in the program, and really what we think is that the Puaiohi out in the wild are stable at about 500 birds. And that's before we started doing rat control, and before we started doing some of the invasive weed removal that we're doing out in that area, and before we fenced, this is a really big new change, this whole area in which they're being released. I really believe that all those things that we're doing in the wild to bring back their habitat, all the fruiting species that this bird depends on because it eats the berries of all the native plants, and knocking down rat numbers will be a really big tool to jump-starting an increase in this population.
The two birds that we're about to release are both females. They've both laid eggs in the past, and the youngest one was hatched in 2013, so she's almost 4 years old. So she's one of our youngest Puaiohi, and she's gonna be hopefully a good breeder. She likes to build nests. She's always actively nest building, and so hopefully she's gonna be good out in the wild. So once we land in the swamp, we're gonna be rebanding both of the birds so that we can know who they are if we ever see them, if the team can find them later. And then we're going to be releasing them back out into the wild. It's a very exciting day for me. I started working with these guys in 2006, and it's amazing to see them all, you know, this whole thing come to fruition and be able to go from breeding them and having little babies to now releasing them back out to the wild. Yeah.
Yep, got him. Okay. Her, yeah. Sorry, lady. Make sure she has the right bands.
Well, let me know if you need any help.
Such big legs. Haven't banded birds here with such big legs. Haven't banded a Puaiohi yet. Jeez. So big.
Alright, do you want a second to get ready for the next one?
What do you need to do with them? Because he's already banned. She's already banded.
Red, orange, aluminum orange.
Okay.
So is that what it's supposed to be?
Yep.
Okay.
It has everything on it. I don't have to do any measurements or anything, so I think they're just good to go to be released.
Okay.
Let me just write down. Yep. Cool. It's all, I think everything's good then.
Yeah, we'll see. Sorry to finish, maybe. That's okay. I would just love the chance to hold on if that's okay. It doesn't happen, but just saying.
I am, yep.
Okay.
Would you like a video of this as well?
Sure.
Goodbye.
Way too fast.